Hello, everyone. My name is Justin, aka Ghost Reader, and today, along with this crazy hat, I'm going to be doing the History Reading Challenge tag. This was a tag created by us, the co-creators of the History Reading Challenge, Emma, Jenny, Justin, and myself. But kudos to Emma for doing the bulk of the work on this tag. And so this tag is a companion to the History Reading Challenge, and so let's go ahead and get into the questions because I think that we're going to have some very interesting answers for this. So, one, what was the first thing that got you into history? So, for me, I think the first real memory of me kind of knowing that I had like a really good interest in history was we had this textbook in history school called it was like the world history from a Christian perspective, fourth edition or something like that. Because I went to a Christian private school, and at the end of the year, we were supposed to give the books back so they could be used by the next year's grade. I kept the book actually. I kept the book and I kept reading it, and I think I read it all the way to the end, and I answered the questions at the end of each chapter, and I would check my answers against what was in the back of the book. And so that's like my first kind of knowing that I had a love for history. I think I also may have gotten a bit of taste for it because as a Christian looking at prophecy, there's like history involved. And so I think like that was a spark there too, for eventually getting into like the history that I read today. Two, what is your favorite history book slash author? So for me right now, my favorite is The Black Cabinet, the untold story of African Americans and politicians in the age of Roosevelt, Joe Watts. If you've been on this channel for the last couple of months, at least since May, you've heard me talk about this. Oh, actually since February, because I did the review then. And so the reason why I love it so much is it filled in gaps in my knowledge of history that I didn't know existed. So I didn't even know about these people. I think if you had asked me that I knew a Black Cabinet exists, I would have said yes, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you much about it. But this book filled in so much of my knowledge on the subject, so much about the people who fought to give blacks rights in this country that don't really get a lot of prompts today, because we focus so much on the civil rights of like the 60s, 50s and 60s. So really love this book, and it's one of my favorites. Three is, what is your most anticipated history book that you have not read yet? And so that's going to be The Dead Are Rising by Les Paynes and Tamara Payne. Unfortunately, Les died before he could finish this book, so his daughter finished it. I actually meant to mention this in my TBR, and you would have seen it towards the end where I put it up on the screen. But and I made a comment saying that I was going to read it. But the reason why I'm really interested in this one is because this book is supposed to go over it's not autobiography, it's a biography of Malcolm X, and it's some new information is supposed to be in this book about Malcolm X. And I also recently watched a documentary on Malcolm X about his assassination on Netflix, and the person who supposedly did it is supposed to have been from a mosque here in Newark, and I live like a town over from Newark. So I'm very interested in this one, and I'm also interested in a book from Mike Duncan. He wrote this book, The Storm Before the Storm, and he's a podcaster, as I said before, history podcaster. He's writing a book on Lafayette, and I think that's going to come out either 2021 or 2022. So I'm very interested in that. I have a good relationship with that publisher, so hopefully I can get a advanced reader copy for that. All right, 4. What is your favorite time period and why? And what book do you want to have read about it? So I think my favorite is hard because like I tend towards topics more than time periods. So my reading is pretty varied. But time period wise, I like kind of like classical to middle age history. I really like that time period. And if what book have I read about it? Well, this book wasn't specifically about like the Middle Ages or classical history, but it did cover it because this this topic was kind of very important to that period, at least within the Mediterranean and Europe period area of the world, and that is the first 2,000 years of Christianity. And of course, it covers history of Christianity, but also covers, since a lot of it, as it became more popular, became entwined with politics, you get a lot of history of Europe in there as well, and the Mediterranean. So, and the good thing about this book is it didn't just cover what was happening in the West with Christianity, but also talked about what's happening in the Middle East, in India, in Russia, in Asia in that time. So it didn't just focus on like a solely Western view of what was happening in Christianity and developments there, but also looked at what was happening in different continents, Africa and other places. So I really like this book, and that's one book that I kind of read about the time period. 5. What time period would you like to learn more about? So I would like to learn more about the classical and Middle Age period, but from the perspective of other cultures, not from like a Western gaze, but from a gaze for their civilization. So more about the Ethiopians, more about the West African empires that were around, India, Asia, China, Japan, other places like that. That and not because they had some interface with Europe, but their own history on their own terms. And so there are definitely books out there that I want to read about it, and I'm still like looking for some good books on those subject, and hopefully can carve out some time to get to them. 6. What is your favorite person in history? And what book do you want to read and or have read about them? So my favorite person in history is Mansa Musa. I would guess if I had to pick like a favorite, mainly because of his flex and that he's one of the richest people ever. So rich that when he went to Egypt and was spending all the gold that he had, that he depressed the economy after he left for about 10 years. I mean, imagine going someplace and you spent so much money that you have like the value of the currency for about 10 years. So that is quite the flex to have. So I think that would be very interesting to read some stuff on him. I haven't picked out any particular books on him, but I definitely want to read something about him in the future. 7. What history topic would you like to see more nonfiction or see more fiction, nonfiction books about? For me, I would like to see more about like the West African empires and kingdoms that arose in West Africa, like Ghana, Mali, Sokoto, the kingdoms of Benin, Dahomey. There's so many. The Ashanti, I think, the Ashanti, yeah. There's so many. I can't remember the names of all of them, but there were so many there that were very interesting, very powerful, and shaped the history of the region. And a lot of the books that kind of deal with West Africa kind of start from when white people came to trade with their empires, and you don't really see much, like too many books about them before contact with Europeans. So I would like to see more books about. I read one book actually that had that did cover the West African like empires. However, it had no sources in it, so I wasn't sure like how reliable the information in it was. I read it; it was good. It gave like a general survey of the empires, like some of the things that they did culturally wise, but like it didn't. I just wasn't sure how good of a source it was, and I haven't really found another book like it. So I'm sure there are books out there like it. It's just that they may not be in English. It may, like, if I went to probably West Africa and was able to understand like whatever language it is there, I probably could find a good one. But maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. I just haven't been able to find it myself. 8. What non-book resources do you enjoy when learning about history? So I enjoy podcasts and documentaries. I will, like, if I'm, the one time when I was at work, I would put on like YouTube in the background and like have a documentary playing. And then when I found podcasts, because my first podcast was history podcast, I started listening to History of Rome. Then I went into the History of Byzantium, which I still have a ways to go in that one. I have to get back to it. There was Revolutions that I was listening to. And so I like looking at documentaries and podcasts as well. Also, even taking dives into Wikipedia, just going down the rabbit hole just to kind of learn like some facts and stuff. So yeah, those are my favorite like non-book resources. Then 9 is a favorite or interesting historical fact or quote. And for me, one very interesting story. There was this Korean guy, I think his name was Yang Kwon-jung. He was a Korean who was forced into the Japanese army. He was conscripted into the Japanese army, and he ended up fighting the Russians at the Battle of, I think it's Khalkhin Gol, and he was captured by the Russians. The Russians take him, put him in a gulag. They needed soldiers to fight the Germans, so he was forced into the Russian army, and he got captured by the Germans. So he ends up in a prisoner of the Germans. Somehow he ends up being put into the line at the seawall facing Britain and was captured on D-Day by the Americans. So he was then captured by the Americans, and at some point he was released and actually lived, I think, until like the 70s out in Illinois. So imagine that, like his story. He went from being a guy living in Korea to being forced to fight for the Japanese, to being captured by the Russians, forced by the Russians to fight, fights for the Russians, gets captured by the Germans, forced to fight for the Germans, gets captured by the Americans, then ends up in the United States. So I mean that's quite the journey, and to survive all that. I mean, he went basically almost all the way around the world. So that's quite the interesting story. I wonder if he ever got to like go home and like see family or anything like that, or just stay in the United States. I think that's a very interesting thing to find out. But yeah, that's quite like the life. Very dangerous, very hard years, I assume, between the Japanese, Russian, and German military prisoner of war camps. But he made it through and survived, and ended up dying here in the United States in Illinois. And then last but not least, give a shout out to a booktuber that you like that reads history. And I'm going to give a shout out to Brian from Bookish. He reads a lot of history, but he also reads a lot of other fiction too, and has very good thoughts on fiction and poetry as well. So definitely go check out his channel. I'll place his channel down in the description box below. So if you're watching this video, please consider yourself tagged. I'd like to thank my co-host for bringing this all together, especially kudos to Emma. She put a lot of work into this tag. And like I said, if you're watching this video and you're part of the history reading challenge, or you're just interested in doing this tag, please feel free to do it. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more videos from me, please subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at GhostReads28, on Instagram at JustinGhostReader, and on Goodreads. Link to that's down in the description box below. So as always, keep reading, history matters, and Black Lives Matter.